Make them squawk or something. Huh? How we doing this morning? Good, good. So it's new, right? It's a lot cooler this morning than I was expecting. All right, we are in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 this morning. If you want to make your way to your morning Bible, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. We've spent a lot of time, several weeks on chapter 1, because it's about celebration. Chapter 2 is about celebration as well. But at this point, we'd be just repeating ourselves. Chapter 2 goes into a little more detail about some things that Paul is addressing that we want to cover. Specifically, chapter 2 is all about how a community is established or created based on relational care. And specifically, I want to highlight Paul's leadership style within that and how it was relational. In fact, what Paul presents and what he did was in such contrast to what people would normally expect from leaders, and I think that it's something that we can all learn from, even marvel at, and the fact that he was willing to do this in light of, or in spite of even, what was considered as cultural values. But Paul is celebrating the fruit of what he's seeing. So remember, the big picture, chapter 1, was that these people, they were so fueled by God's activity in their lives, by what God was doing, right? And Paul is celebrating that, and he's also celebrating how they are responding to this. Remember, he talks about them having this tangible faith. It was just for everyone to see, to the point to where it was just spreading, right? Their reputation, as it were, which was a big deal in first century. Reputation was spreading so much that Paul says, we don't have to say anything, okay? And now we go on to chapter 2, and we're talking about building community through relational care. Now, a few things just to set the tone here. In the first century church, communities that were founded, considered the church, right? They met where? In homes and other informal settings, typically, okay? Typically. In these small group settings, okay? There were things like relational trust and this feeling that we were doing life together. So the shared life experiences, like those are the things that were essential, okay? For the group to feel like it was cohesive, for there to be some stability, for, well, even the group to survive, okay? And such was the case with the church in Thessalonica as well. Now, in the Greco-Roman society, let's talk about leaders just for a moment. Leaders sought out what? Anybody want to take a guess? Say that again? Followers, okay. What else? What were leaders, not necessarily the church, just generally speaking, the Greco-Roman society, leaders, what were they after? Power. What gave power? Money. What else? Influence, honor, reputation, right? All of these things. And so leaders sought out honor and authority and public recognition, okay? Another, should we say, classification of a leader, I use that term loosely, in the first century, were philosophers, orators, people who were very eloquent in speech, okay? Huge presence in the Greco-Roman world. Huge, huge presence, okay? These are the kinds of people who often projected strength and dignity and eloquence of language, if you will, right? Rhetorical dominance would be one way to talk about it, okay? People who speak so powerfully that it's like, okay, that would be the response. Like, what do you do with that? I can't argue against it, okay? Those were prominent in Greco-Roman societies, okay, and especially in a place like Thessalonica. Okay, that's important to understand. Now, oftentimes, when it comes to leaders like this, social leaders, philosophers, whoever it is, teachers, whatever, there was oftentimes a social gap between the leader and everybody else. That's important to understand, okay? There would be a social gap between the leader, whoever he was, and everybody else, okay? So, as a result, leaders were accustomed to doing things like posturing up. You know what I mean by that? Posturing up, right? All of a sudden, they're standing in this reality, at least in their perception, their mind, that they are different from you, and they're higher than you, right? And they look at you the same, and they teach you the same, right? Their approach is of the same mindset, okay? So it means they're dominating, right? Very domineering. They're demanding honor, okay? And they're going to leverage their authority over you, okay? That is common. That was what leadership was. That was expected in the Greco-Roman world, okay? Why are we talking about this? Because Paul's actually going to address that in chapter 2. Okay, that's exactly what he's talking about in chapter 2 of 1 Thessalonians. So let's go there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and we'll begin here in verse 1. We'll walk all the way through this, and if there's any questions, confusions, just let us know, okay? How's that sound? Good, okay. So, coming out of chapter 1, right, this celebration of, man, God's action in their lives and where they are in light of their circumstances. He says, "For you yourselves know, brothers and sisters, about our coming to you. It has not proven to be purposeless or fruitless." Notice what he says, about our coming to you. Understand, this was a common thing. People like Paul in Thessalonica, trading hub, people like Paul were common. People who would be from some other place, come through with some teaching, some religious propagandist, if you will, right? Or maybe some philosopher of a new way, or whatever it was. This was common, okay? Now, Paul is going to address how he and his entourage, how they approached, right? How they were different, and how important it is for them to remember this, okay? So, right? Us coming to you has not proven to be purposeless or fruitless. That's important. Remember that. But although we suffered earlier and were mistreated in Philippi, as you know, we had the courage in our God to declare to you the gospel of God. Underline this in your mind. In spite of much opposition. Okay? So, as we continue to read through these words, the question we need to ask is, why? What was the motivation here? Okay? In spite of much opposition, what's Paul's motivation here? Like, why would he be willing to? Why were they willing to do this? Okay? Keep that in your mind. Verse 3. For the appeal we make does not come from error or impurity or with deceit. These three things are important. Now, we read this, and we have our conclusions or things that we think about that he's talking about that come to our mind. This is where understanding and culture and what people would normally experiencing comes into play. These right here are three things, like I said, your itinerant teachers, if you will, right? Your philosophers, your traveling religious propagandists, I don't know, whatever phrases you want to use, okay? All these people who would come in traveling, going around looking for prestige and honor and followers. This was obviously a very common thing. Common accusations against people like this included these three words. The very things that Paul's talking about right here. Error. This is a spreading of false philosophy or superstition. Okay? Impurity, which was oftentimes a euphemism for things like sexual exploitation or moral corruption. In other words, there were ulterior motives. Things that weren't as they appeared, right? The people who were the leaders, back in the old Western movies. What do they call these kinds of people who came through? Traveling salesman. Snake oilsman, right? All right, okay? Think about that in your mind, okay? So impurity, right? There was some other things going on here. And deceit. This had to do with rhetorical manipulation, using words so that you can obtain money and honor, okay? Those things were oftentimes people, like Paul, those coming through with these teachings like this, these public figures were oftentimes evaluated in light of these things because this was so common. And this is what people used to discredit people like Paul. Okay? That's important. You trekking? Okay. This is why he goes on to say, look at verse 4. But just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, so we declare it, not to please people, but God, who examines our hearts. For we never appeared, pay attention, with flattering speech, as you know, nor with a pretext for greed. God is our witness. Nor to seek, do you see the three things that he's saying? Do you see the connection here? Nor to seek glory from people, either from you or from others. I'll say it again. This trade hub, you got to imagine the amount of people coming in and out constantly, okay? Trade hub like Thessalonica. People who lived there knew what they were looking at when they saw it, okay? So just imagine being in a place like Thessalonica and, you know, maybe at first you were a little bit gullible, but over time you gained some understanding. You knew what to look for. You knew what to cite when you saw people. You knew what to expect, or at least you thought, right? And it gets to the point to where you can spot them a mile away. You know what you're looking at, right? Like imagine that, okay? That's this place right here. They understood people passing through all the time, okay? Not that they wouldn't give ear, but I think that they were pretty quick to be able to take note of who they could dismiss or who seemed to have ulterior motives, okay? Things like that. So this place is very common, okay? When Paul says this right here, he is addressing the three primary categories by which people like Paul and others who came through were evaluated. Okay? Scott?
What he was fighting against was the first century version of mass market.
Yeah, yes.
There was no other thing. Whoever spoke the loudest,
Yep.
nobody was pitching.
Exactly. Okay? So he says, listen, there's no hidden agenda here, right? No hidden agenda. No emotional manipulation, right? The message was true, okay? Motives clean. The relationships that were developed here, sincere. Why would it be important for the Apostle Paul to make note of this? Like he's going in circles right now. He's repeating himself in a lot of ways. Okay, yes. In new group settings like this, okay, this would inspire trust. It's like, hey, you experienced it. Now let's think about what you experienced, right? Let's think about what happened. And it's like, oh yeah. Think about it. Like, remember, this is what happened. And remember, this was the response. This is what you experienced. Oh yeah, you're right. That's important, okay? Because it will inspire trust, and that's what's needed. Okay, go ahead.
I think he's trying to take himself out of the middle. But I'm not doing this for my glory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to puff myself up. It's all about the gospel.
Yeah.
And just trying to focus on the truth
Yeah.
of that and take away all the motivation.
Yes.
All of it. But it could be his motive of himself.
When you understand what he's up against in light of people like him were very common coming through, okay? He says, although, verse 7. Now, here's the thing. He's like, does he have weight to throw around? Like, from the world's perspective, okay? Does he have weight to throw around? Yes, he does, from the world's perspective, okay? If you would evaluate his credentials based on what the world looks for, does he have anything? Yeah, he talks about this in in other places where he's like, listen, you want to boast? Let me tell you, Bob. And then he says, but I throw all that away, right? I throw all that away. He says, look at verse 7. Although we could have imposed our weight as apostles of Christ. So he's not saying we came in here because, well, this is our only option. Is he? What would be the importance of him mentioning the fact that, oh, well, we're apostles? Why would that be important? Or what impact would that have in light of everything else that he's saying? Credibility. As what kind of leader? Yeah, one who's directed by God. What's his approach? Come on. Yeah, right? It's like, listen, I could stand up on a pedestal all day long and act it just like anybody else would who would be someone in my position. But he says, no, we didn't do that. Could have. In other words, from the world's perspective, social perspective, if Paul would have done that, would it have been justified? Yes. Right? From the community's perspective, social perspective, it's what people would expect. Paul says, but that's not what you experience. Look what he says. Although we could have imposed our weight as apostles of Christ, instead we became like little children among you. Do you see the contrast? Do you see the contrast? We became like little children among you, right? So you're talking in a world that is structured with hierarchy and status and honor, right? Paul uses this image of what? What does children represent? Innocence, okay? Yeah. Yes. So Paul uses this image of really lowliness and vulnerability, okay? Children had no social power whatsoever. No credibility whatsoever, okay? No legal standing. They depended entirely on everyone else. They were culturally insignificant. So think about this, just as a sidestep. There's a lot of things I think we could take away from the moments where Jesus grabs children and puts them on his lap and says, unless you become like this. One of those is that very thing. Children had, it was just shh. When the time is right, we'll train you, and we'll teach you how to socially, exist and survive. But until then, keep your mouth shut. To be seen, not heard type thing, right? They had no power, okay? No power. And so to become like little children would be what? Part of that would be what? Humility. Become like a servant in that sense, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. That's so. Not far removed, are we? Right. So think about it. I'm an apostle of Christ, yet we became like what? Like little children among you. What does that say about the approach here? Think about it. Who are we talking about? Who is this? This is the Apostle Paul. Who is the Apostle Paul? What kind of education did he have? What kind of social standing would he have? He was a Roman citizen, educated. Like, this isn't an idiot, okay? Like, he would be justified socially to act like every other person who would seeking honor and reputation and so forth, right? He has apostolic authority, right? What's he saying? We lowered ourselves, right? We lowered ourselves. We did not posture. We did not dominate, right? We did not demand honor. Didn't even leverage authority. Do you see what he's doing here? In light of what would be expected as a leader within the Greco-Roman cultural society, you see what he's doing here? Okay? And it's in contrast, isn't it? It's in contrast, right? So there's something different about this, okay? And that's important, okay? So he says, essentially, listen, we're not playing the honor competition, are we? Things are a little bit different. Their approach is different, right? There is no flattery. There's no greed. There's no seeking glory, right? We did not relate to you as a patron client. You guys familiar with that? Right? Like, even if it wasn't officially a patron-client relationship, that was really how relationships worked in so many different ways, okay, on so many different levels, okay? It's like, but this isn't how we treated you. This isn't how we approached you, okay? Seeking you, right? There's no control through forcing you to be obligated to us. Instead, their approach was like we're obligated to you. Okay? Instead of that approach, what was his approach? He uses these terms multiple times. We'll get to a few more here in a minute. Children. What's the approach? What does that bring to mind? Okay. Anything else? What kind of relationship is that? What kind of group setting would that be? Family, okay? He uses familial language, right? He says our approach was more like family, gentle and intimate. What does that mean? Familial, gentle, intimate. What word? Is there a word that describes his approach as a leader? Loving. What else? Because it's deep, it's significant, it's under the surface, right? His leadership style is what? Any guess? Starts with an R. Ends with an L. More words than four letters. More letters than four. Radical, okay. Relational. It's relational. Do you see that? It's a contrast between what they would expect with people like Paul coming through. Okay, this Greco-Roman perception of what it means to be a leader and what it takes to be a leader. Paul is painting a different picture, right? And this relationship is relational, okay? It's not a patron-client. It's not, I'm here and you're there. Remember, there's oftentimes a gap between the leader and everybody else. Paul says, we bridge that gap. It's not there. Look at it, okay? Look at it. This is why he says, right, we became like little children among you. And then he uses the next phrase, like a nursing mother caring for her own children, with such affection for you. Do you see the words that he's using here? Affection. Like, what's he trying to paint here? A bond. Is that what you said? Yeah. You're not going to get a stronger bond, especially in general, I think, but in the Greco-Roman world, in that culture, the biblical culture, yeah, the social bond, there's nothing bigger, deeper, more important, more vital than the familial bond, okay? And regardless of the values and how all those relationships worked out, okay? That was everything, okay? That's important. So with such affection for you, we were happy to share with you. That's different. Remember the gap between the leader and everybody else? What does he say? We bridged that gap. How? We shared with you not only the gospel of God, not only the good news of God, but also what? Our own lives. Our own lives. Because you had become dear to us. Do you see the language that's being used here? He said we shared our own lives. What does that mean? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What does he mean he shared their lives? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And as a result, you become vulnerable. Come on. And then it's just so good. Hold on to that thought. It's like, there's no gap here. He's starting to bridge that gap, and what he's going to get to, which we'll get to here in a moment, is that we were just like you. Right? We postured ourselves to be just like you. We were one of you. You were one of us. Right? There wasn't a gap here. No. We functioned among you like equals. And he uses these in terms of endearment. Man, he's just gushing, okay, with love here. Affection, right? Right. Come on, right? Yeah, didn't show up looking for faults, right? Okay, so we shared our lives with you, right? Because you become dear to us. He's saying that we were relationally invested. It wasn't just us and you, it was all of us together. Right? We were relationally invested, right? He's using this kinship language, which again represents the strongest possible bond, especially in that social bond, especially in that culture, which would have resonated with them, right? Which is why he says, listen, we shared our own lives. That's what family does. That's what kinsmen groups do, okay? For you recall, verse 9. Brothers, any questions about that so far? Are we tracking? Okay, all right. For you recall, brothers and sisters, our toil and drudgery. What does that mean? It's a word that means painful and difficult labor. Okay, not like childbirthing labor. It's a different kind of labor, okay? Toil and drudgery, by working night and day, so as not to impose a burden on any of you, we preach to you the gospel of God. What's this language? What's he saying here?
There are good characteristics of a family relationship. There are also characteristics that are maybe not so positive
Mm-hmm.
that might kind of get in the way of being a close family, but you work through those
Yeah.
in a family.
Okay. Okay.
Everyday goal.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. That's, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. This is language, this is like solidarity type language. Goes back to, hey, when we were among you, how did we act? Like we were a part of you. No different. All in this together, doing all the same things, functioning, working, doing our part, pulling our weight, whatever it is, okay, whatever language you want to use, okay? It's relatable, right? Like, we are just like you. What does this do? What does this help do? Leader, everybody else, gap, what does this do? Takes that gap away, okay? Takes that gap away. So this removes this social distance, right, between leaders and everyone else. Again, this is in light of verses 3 through 6, where he denies things like error and impurity and deceit and greed and seeking human glory. And verses 7 through 9, instead, what does he describe? What are the words that he uses? Gentleness, right, and tender care, and like the self-giving labor and unity and solidarity, right? This is what he's describing. Okay, verse 10. You are witnesses, and so is God, as to how holy and pay attention to this, holy and righteous and blameless our conduct was towards you who believe. Okay. Honor and shame cultures. Reputation. Most important thing. Okay? Most important thing. Mattered deeply. Okay? What the Apostle Paul here says, right here, is a serious claim. Okay? He's talking about their reputation. Okay? It's a serious claim, but it's grounded in what? Yeah, it's observable. What does he say? You are witnesses. You are witnesses, and so is God, right? So you know this, you've seen this, you've experienced this, you are witnesses, and then he brings in divine accountability, right? So is God, okay? And then he connects what he says here, and we need to do this, connect what he says here with the previous claims. Go back to verse 3. What did he say? What are the 3 words he used? 3 evaluations, 3 claims oftentimes made against people like him and others. What are the 3 words he used? Verse 3. Okay. Error, impurity, and deceit. And then he lays that alongside what? Holy, righteous, and blameless. Our what was? What's the word he uses here? Conduct. What we did, how we functioned, right? What you experienced with us. And so, as to morals, holy, right? Upright and just. No legitimate accusation could stand up against what they've done. You see that? Like there's no claim. Remember, people they were evaluated. These are oftentimes the things that people saw, and that's how they got discredited. What does the Apostle Paul say? They don't hold up. They don't hold up. Not like everybody else, right? As you know, verse 11, we treated each one of you as a what? Father treats his own children. Wait a minute. Verse 7, okay, so he first uses children. And then he says, verse 7, gentle as what? A nursing mother, right? Yes, mothers provide, especially, we could go off about this, but first century context, the social context there, mothers' primary role in a family was to provide nourishment to the children, right? And then he goes on to talk about a father. What was the primary role of a father? Okay. Yeah, the mother provides nourishment, and the father instructed and prepared, especially the sons, for public life. Right? There's instruction there. And so what does all this tell us about Paul's leadership style? What are we gathering? Servant-style leadership, right? Tender, affectionate, right? But also, I would use the word formative, okay? Yeah. Directional, right? This is his leadership style. Okay, that's important. And this is what they've experienced. Okay? So, are you seeing the connection between everything that's been stated up to this point? Okay? Because all this is leading somewhere. It's important to see this. Okay? He lays out, you remember verse 1, our approach to when we came to you, right? It's not fruitless. Okay? If it would have been fruitless, what would have been the accusations that could have been labeled against them? Error, impurity, deceit, okay? All right, so that's the point he's making, okay? So everything he said is leading up to this. Now, why would it be important for him to spend all this time In our day, we would have said, Paul, get on with it, right? Why would he spend all this time? Why was this important? He's talking about their character. Okay, the integrity of the messenger is super important, right? Like, plays a huge role in protecting the credibility of what? The message, what they're saying. Okay, this is important. Now, he's laying this out because we talked about this earlier. It helps to inspire trust, okay? And there's a lot, I think there's some other things in this letter that Paul hints that we're not aware of. There's some more going on here. Maybe just some insecurities from the people wondering, like, why has it been so long? We haven't heard from you. Like, what happened? What's going on? There could be some of that stuff. But everything that he said up to this point is moving towards what he says next, okay? Look at verse 12. So, we became like little children, like mothers nourishing, right? Like a father treats his own children, exhorting. That's urging forward is the idea. Exhorting, go ahead.
Just one little thing.
Go ahead.
You said something like, this is the situation Paul is talking from is like the first century version of the mass market. And we as people understand that what we are seeing and hearing every day, we need to be leery of about 97% of it.
Right, yeah.
It may not be quite true.
Mm.
And the other people that he's talking to here may be just as leery and need to be convinced
Yeah.
that this is something we should listen to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, good thoughts. So, the father doing what? In light of that, in light of what, this is so good. In light of that, the father is urging you forward, exhorting you, and encouraging you. The word here has to do with this gentle influence with words. Okay? Just because you say it doesn't mean it's encouraging. Just because you say it doesn't mean it's encouraging. This gentle influence with words, and then insisting, think charging you. Okay? Charging you. That you live in a way, I love this word, live in a way. It's that word that's oftentimes translated walk. Walk. I absolutely love it. There's something about it that just, because it's the idea, you guys might remember, Paul uses this a lot. And it's part of what Paul himself had to experience. How do you go from, I'm going to do everything I can to wipe these people out, to, well, being this guy writing this letter, right? Being like planting all these churches and goes from being against the movement to being for it. What happens? Paul had to experience this very thing, the idea of walking, living. It's the idea of becoming so accustomed to it that you become one with it. You're exploring it. You're searching. You're walking. The word literally has to do with walking around and even revisiting the same places over and over and over again, to the point to where you become so accustomed, like you know where it's at. You know what's going on. Like, you go walking on trails, anybody? Hiking? You have a favorite spot you go to, walking around in the woods, and you just know where you're at. Why? Because you're so familiar with it. It's like you become one with it. That's the picture here. You become one with it. It's the same word that Peter used when he talks about Satan as a roaring lion, walking about, seeking whom he may devour, doing the same thing, but for different reasons. Okay? I love this word. Absolutely love this word. Because it's becoming so familiar with it, testing it out, working it out, okay, in real life experience. It connects us back to what Jesus said. If you remain in my words, then you're my disciples, and you'll come to know the truth, and the truth will do what? Set you free. The word know there means what? It's a funny little Greek word. Yeah, it's experiential. It's on-the-job training, okay? So it's like, just test it out and see. Okay, so anyways, he says that you live in a way worthy of God who calls you to his own kingdom. This is shared experience. Think about where they're at. What would come to their mind when you say the word kingdom? Think empire. Think Rome. Okay? Think allegiance. Think all that's tied into that. Okay? But God calls you to his own kingdom. This is your shared allegiance, if you will, and his glory. This is your shared destiny. Okay? And now he celebrates their response. I love this. Verse 13. You ready? Man, we got 3 minutes. And so we too constantly thank God that when you received, here's that prayer. It's like a prayer that he closes this portion out. And he's setting it up for the the rest of the letter, really. That when you received God's message that you heard from us, you accepted it not as a human message, but as it truly is God's message, which is at work and among you who believe. This ties directly back to verse 3, right? It's not of error, not impurity, or deceit. He says, our message was not manipulation. Your reception was not gullibility, which would be the thing that they had to be so cautious about, right? With all these people like Paul coming through. So your reception was not gullibility, right? How do we know that? What does he say? God himself was at work. This is what you experienced. God himself was at work, right? At work among you. Literally, it's active. God's word is active and shaping you, is the idea, okay? And this explains what he says next. For you became imitators. For you became imitators, brothers and sisters, of God's churches in Christ Jesus that are in Judea, because you too suffered the same things from your own countrymen as they in fact did from the Jews. Paul's Jewishness is really beginning to shine. You're going to see that here, okay? He connects their suffering to what? Yeah, the persecution of the Jews. Same thing he used to do. Right? A much larger family, a much larger thing that's happening, okay? That he would have done everything to hinder, okay? So in other words, what does this tell them? You're not alone. Part of the same family, right? This is solidarity, okay? This is terms of solidarity. And this, I'm telling you, this would have meant so much, okay? So what they're experiencing is not shameful or in isolation, but it's in solidarity. Okay? And he says, those who killed, verse 15, both the Lord Jesus and the prophets and persecuted us severely, they are displeasing to God, and here's where his Jewishness is really coming out, and are opposed to all people because they hinder us from speaking to the Gentiles so that they may be saved. What's he talking about here? Dang, out of time. What's he talking about here? It's why all this mess got started in the first place and how he got separated from them. Because you go back to Acts 17, who stirred up the mob? When they all went through there, to Thessalonica, you had lots of Greeks, men and women, and some Jews who, man, they were all about it. But then you had some who were like, not happening. They were envious of those who were following after Paul. Who were they? Jews. This is exactly what he's talking about here, right? That's who he's referring to here, okay? And then he says, so this points back to this conflict. Thus they constantly fill up their measure of sins, but wrath, this is apocalyptic language here. This is Paul's Jewishness coming out. But wrath has come upon them completely, okay? You see this language throughout Hebrew Scripture. There's this persistent opposition, right, to God's work and what God's doing. It has consequences, and Paul seems to think, and we don't know, this is part of that, we're not aware of everything Paul's thinking about here, but he seems to see the consequences unfolding already, which is why he says, what? They constantly fill up the measure of sins, but wrath has come upon them completely. Something that's going on that Paul sees that he's connecting to their actions, the consequences of what they're doing, okay? Okay. Any questions or comments about that? Well, we're out of time. Clear as mud? Okay. We'll pick up there next week.